Our next presenters are from Beacon Health System, based in South Bend, Indiana. Daryl Yoder began his career in analytics 30 years ago on a TI-99, writing reports in DBase. He started working at Elkhart General Hospital, which later became part of Beacon Health System in 2001, first as an analyst for supply chain and pharmacy, then as a consultant in performance improvement before he was hired into his current position as manager 2 years ago when Beacon created the BI department. Daryl has a graduate degree in early childhood special education, and he plays the tuba. Colin Nolan started his career with Beacon Health System 7 years ago. He has spent most of his time with the health system as a programmer, developer, focusing mainly on data extraction and report writing. He has been with Business Intelligence as the data architect for 1 year. As for an interesting fact, Colin comes from a very big family. He says his brothers are all over 6 feet tall, but alas, he did not get the height gene. Please welcome Daryl and Colin.
Kathy, thanks for that introduction. It is absolutely a delight and a pleasure to be in a room full of DI enthusiasts. We're looking forward to things that we can learn the next day and a half. So it truly is a pleasure to be here. Daryl Yoder, I've been with Business Intelligence about 2 years when the department was formed. We're brand new. The agenda for today is a brief introduction, overview of our health system, the things that we're currently doing in Measure Factory and how that overlays with what Dimensional Insight Measure Factory solutions look like. We'll look at the transparency and data transformation within the Measure Factory, and then we'll have a conclusion and open up for discussions. Beacon Health System is a regional provider of healthcare in northern Indiana. We have 3 hospitals. Memorial Hospital of South Bend, Elkhart General Hospital, and we recently acquired Community Hospital of Bremen. 70 physician offices, about 400 providers, 2 ACOs that are managed by Beacon. Medicare is one of them is Medicare, and the other is a commercial population. Our 2017 volumes were about 33,000 discharges from the acute care facilities, about 100,000 ED visits, and about 120,000 individual patients in the medical group. We're looking at about 400,000 visits. The current department is really relatively small. Dan Parker is my boss. He's the director of value-based strategy. He reports to the chief strategy and growth officer. I'm manager of business intelligence. I transferred in from pharmacy in 2016. Colin Nolan, our data architect and former programmer, and now data architect extraordinaire. Ellen Dickey is a data analyst. She had worked with Dan prior to the formation of BI. And Jonathan will be joining us on Monday to that data engineer joining us. Timeline, the contract for DI was signed back in August of last year. It's a relatively brief time period. We're currently in the soft go-live period. The hospital operations Measure Factory went live just before Christmas. We are still in the go-live, and I think one of the issues is, what we've talked about already, is the whole matter of trust. One of the issues that we've been facing is finance has been pushing back, and we'll get back into that. We'll talk about it a little bit later. We currently have 22 ProDiver users and hospital operations ProDiver DivePro users, with 35 of those as primarily the C-suite and some of the higher level analysts. Current Measure Factory solutions that we have implemented, the hospital operations Measure Factory, we're bringing information in from the 2 separate hospitals right now, both from Elkhart and from Memorial, bringing in McKesson Star financial information. We do not have EHRs implemented yet. From Cerner, we're bringing in SearchNet and FirstNet, primarily patient tracking information from those 2 systems. We've loaded the NPPES, or the MPI registry, that helps us to normalize the data. As you can imagine, when we're bringing in ambulatory physician names and bringing them also from the 2 different hospitals and now 3 hospitals, it's either Dr. John Smith or Dr. John A. Smith, MD, or Dr. John N. Smith, period, MD, all the permutations that you can have on the physician name. So what we've done is normalized it, brought in the NPI registry, and so using that NPI registry, we now have a common physician name across Diver. We're also we did the same thing with the ICD-10 catalog from CMS, so that the descriptions are going to be common across all installations. Market research, Measure Factor, we purchase information from the Indiana Hospital Association on acute care facility visits. We use that data, we've loaded it in, and we use that for looking at market share and payer mix. Our ACO claims data is being loaded in. We have most of it ready to be loaded into Diver. Right now we're kind of doing some of the pre-work on that, the CMS CCLF claims data. We have a homegrown ticket management system that has been placed in Diver, and our future plans for the Measure Factories would be our ambulatory system, hospital EHR, PeopleSoft or HR data, and active staffer. One thing I would like to say is, and I think, Fred, you really drove the point home that you didn't say this in this many words, but progress moves at the speed of trust. And I think that's one of the big issues that I mentioned before, that finance pushes back a little bit sometimes when we first approach them. And we said this Diver product, Measure Factor, is phenomenal because it allows us to identify a cohort, for example, of stroke patients. And they say, well, what do you mean by stroke patient? How do you identify that? So we took them to the Measure Dictionary and showed them that this is what's defined as a stroke patient. And they said, yay, stroke patient equals flag equals true. Tell us more. And so we said, well, we know that it's in the Measure Factor. We can go in and look at it. And what we discovered was the power of the data that's already, the metadata that's already in the Measure Factory. It wasn't transparent. We had transparency down to the first level, but what we didn't do, what we were not able to do, was to follow the trail of measures and flags within Measure Factory to get to something that a layperson, or let's say somebody in finance, could readily understand. So that's what Colin is here to talk about. What we've done is added another layer. We've taken the Diver Dimensional Insights product, the Measure Factory, gotten a layer deeper into the metadata to make it more transparent, and we believe that's the key for a successful implementation. Here's Colin.
Thanks, Stu. So first of all, a disclaimer. I came in just a year ago to start working with business intelligence, and that's when I was introduced to Diver, and we were implementing Measure Factory at that point, and so that's what I know best. And I know it's the latest and greatest coming out of Dimensional Insight, but I have a bias towards it because that's what I use all the time. But it is, throughout my experience and going back and using the full robust tooling that they have within the product, I continually validate that bias. It seems to be a really impressive tool. So what I want to talk about today, first just talk about implementation of a DI solution. So something that they give you, a Measure Factory solution that they would give, and this is from the healthcare perspective, of course. And then go into the actual tool itself and just kind of look at, or kind of explain more about how the tool works and what it is, and some of the nice features, and then get into what Darryl was just talking about, and what we like that you were hitting on in your introduction was that trust. I know we feel like in some ways we've been a little slow with our implementation, but I think it really rings true when we hear that, because before we can start handing out numbers to people and telling them that we're solving their problems, we have to make sure they have a level of trust in the data. And I think Measure Factory really gives a good tool to do that. It actually, you call it a foundation, a data foundation. It's also, I think of it as a funnel. You bring in a lot of data from a lot of different places. You define it and you make it right in the Measure Factory, and then you make it trustworthy, and then you start answering questions with the data as it flows out. So, going into a DI Measure Factory solution, so something that DI offers out of the box. Beacon's experience, the first thing that comes to mind is ease of implementation. It is very easy to implement from the client's perspective. Really what is needed from the clients is just raw data feeds and data specs to be filled out. And that is not that hard to do. I mean, it may be harder for some organizations than others, but if you have anyone that does data extraction, that's a simple part of the process. Then Measure Factory and DI, they do the heavy lifting. They give you a nice product with a lot of standard definitions that they've gotten from hopefully standard, gold standard sources, and with healthcare that would be CMS and the government. They use those definitions to create the nice definitions within your data so that you can actually view it in a nice way. So it gives you a good starting point without having to really make a lot of decisions, and it's fast. We were slow on getting feeds to them. It took me a little while. Daryl says I'm good, but I was slow. But really, when we finalized our last feed and cleaned it up to mention, I want to say Matt Gorman was our programmer. I think it was the next day that he had a product ready for us to look at. So it's really, really fast. The web-based iPort reports, like you were you've seen a little bit of before. I'm not going to show any of that at this point, but it's really out of the box. You have a lot of nice standard. Dashboards, and they're interactive, which is great. So you have the high level for the high level people that just care about looking at big numbers, and you have the ability, you can actually work through the data. You can have people that do data exploration and look into it, which is wonderful. So a really nice starting point. But then again, the trust. Where is the trust? You can hand that out of the box to somebody, and they can look at the numbers and tell you, well, I don't believe them. And then you're stuck. It's not doing anything for you. So the tool itself is very powerful, and we've started using it for a lot of custom solutions. It really is a coding language. If you want to talk about it, you can talk about it in a flowery way, but it really is just a data processing language. And I liked it because I came from a heavy database kind of background, and structured query languages, very high level, easy to, and when I say high level, very easy to read and understand and to write. And Measure Factory is the same way. It's data oriented. It's mainly about data processing, so it's easily understood, and that makes it transparent to the average user. So it's coding, but it's actually very transparent coding. Within the Measure Factory, you define a lot of rules and you define a lot of measures. That's the beef of it. That's what you're doing. You're taking your data and you're taking the raw fields that you have, you're coupling them together, and you're making decisions about that and defining a new field. So you define all these rules and all these measures, and they get very coupled. They get layers deep. This rule depends on this rule, that depends on this rule. And that's okay. That's what you have to do with raw data sets. But it can be confusing when you're looking at the final product. But going further, the coding is not coupled. And coming from a programmer standpoint, we talked about functional coding and then highly coupled coding. And highly coupled coding is horrible because if something breaks, you've got to work your way through it from the beginning to the end and figure out what went wrong. Where something's functional, you can really hone down right where there's an issue quickly. And so that's kind of how the coding is with Measure Factory. It's very simple, it's very high level, it's like a structured query language almost. And you can get into the issues you can see very clearly. It's not this coupled mess that's doing a whole bunch of other stuff that isn't really around data processing. It's really data processing. So it's a one-stop shop. For each solution, there's one file. It sounds, I don't know if that means anything to anyone, but for me, it's great because if you're looking at a whole bunch of integrator scripts or whatever all laid out in a tree structure, or anywhere, they could be across servers, you have to do a lot of exploration to go through and find where things are being transformed. But in the Measure Factory, it's all happening in one place. And I think you guys were touching on that before, but that is key. Because now all that transformation happens in one place, it's transparent. It can stay transparent. Outputs data into Columnar databases, not to bore you with that, but of course, anyone that deals with data knows that you got to be in the Columnar world if you want to do any kind of aggregation in real time. It bakes in a ton of DI coding, so that's kind of back to the decoupling. So when you do Measure Factory, you're writing the code, you're dealing with data and transformation. You're not dealing with how to write a die plan or a C plan or layering the script on top of it or moving data around. You're just dealing with processing data. And then Measure Factory actually does a lot of that extra boring stuff for you and does it just fine because you don't need to have someone write some of those things. You can have that automated and it does it. So it's really been a very nice tool in that regard. So going further, looking at transparency in how you transform the data, or in the transformation of the data, that was a big question for us. How do we do that? How do we kind of lead people through what we did in the Measure Factory to tell them what a newborn account was? You know, simple things. And in healthcare, you'll find simple things like inpatient account actually depend on a lot of different values. You think it would just be one flag, but it's not. So you have to make people trust that. They know that. People that know the data know that there's highly coupled reasoning to make a decision, and they may not trust what you say. So, so what we realized was Measure Factory outputs, since it's such decoupled coding and it's so simple, and you're mainly dealing with processing and writing rules and measures, it can easily output all of the data, the metadata, the data you wrote in the Measure Factory as discrete data. And so there it gets pumped into CBases. So now, if look, so this is what gets output, just a nice suite of CBases. If you look at it closely, and if you're database oriented, you would realize right away, and we did when we were getting trained and someone showed this offhand to us, that's a relational database. It's just related it's a database with referential integrity. So we thought we can use that. That's something we can use. If you want to look closely at it, you know, there's a rule info that gives you data on the rules that you wrote, how they were written. There's a many-to-many relation down here with rules to rules. So now you can link to those sub-rules. You can do the same thing with measures, and you can do the same thing with measures to rules. So now you have linkable data between all of these definitions that you've written within the Measure Factory. So what we decided, so this, and I see what DI has been using it for, and I don't want to speak for Dimensional Insight, but I know what I know from our product. Right here is a good example of how it's very nice. One of the dashboards that we have has a measure on it, inpatient charges, and you pull the measure analysis portlet. Gives you a lot of nice information. You got some trending, some aggregation over here, and I don't know if you can see my mouse too well, but hopefully. So over to the left, you see that there is a definition. There's an explanation of how this measure was calculated. And that's great. And you see right away down in the expression, that was pulled from those CBases. I know it was. That's why they probably put this stuff together, was to be able to pull that out and say, hey, here's how we calculated it. Very simple. And the beautiful thing about this is that's the code. That's it. You can read this. It's a sum of total charges, and you're filtering on inpatient. Makes perfect sense. That's where you're getting your inpatient charges. But you're not getting a translation or an explanation from somebody that can mess things up. You're getting the code directly. And it's readable and understandable by a layperson that doesn't code. So, so that's very nice, but it does leave you kind of dead in the water with this example, that you can't really dive into the actual definitions. So this is a simple one. What if it were based on 3 or 4 more rules? That might be hard to figure out. You might see that there's some rules you don't understand, and at that point you're dead in the water. You can't go anywhere. The inpatient here, what is it?